crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the marble floors of Bellini's, the city's most exclusive restaurant. I moved between tables like a ghost, collecting plates from patrons who never bothered to look up, their diamond cufflinks and pearls worth more than my entire year's salary. My black uniform blended into the shadows as I balanced a tray of half-eaten filet mignon and barely touched risotto. 3 more hours of this shift, and my feet were already screaming in the mandatory heels that pinched with every step I took across the plush carpet. The envelope with the final notice from Memorial Hospital seemed to burn through my pocket. Mom's treatment had to be paid by Friday, or they'd discontinue the experimental therapy that was her last hope. $17,000 that might as well have been $17 million for all I could afford it. Mr. DeSanto, our head chef, barked orders in rapid Italian as I deposited dishes at the washing station. His temper was legendary, but his food more so. The reason governors, celebrities, and certain powerful men preferred this discreet corner of the city for their most private conversations. I grabbed fresh water pitchers and moved back into the dining room, carefully averting my eyes from table 7, where security men with telltale bulges beneath their jackets flanked an elegant dinner party. Their presence was a warning sign recognized by all staff. Serve quickly. See nothing. Hear nothing. "Sophia, check on table 7, whispered Margot, our floor manager, her face pinched with anxiety. "They need fresh plates for dessert, and Romano specifically requested you handle it personally." My heart stuttered in my chest as I approached the table, my gaze fixed respectfully on the pristine white tablecloth. 5 men in impeccable suits sat in conversation that ceased abruptly at my arrival, leaving only the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. I felt his eyes on me before I dared look up. Victor Romano, whose name was whispered rather than spoken in most circles. His dark gaze traveled over me with the casual assessment of a man accustomed to owning whatever he desired, the thin scar along his jawline catching the candlelight. "Gentlemen, the tiramisu here is exceptional," he said, his voice carrying a hint of his Sicilian heritage despite flawless English. "You should all try it while we conclude our discussion about the waterfront property." As I carefully collected the dinner plates, my hand trembled slightly, causing a fork to slip and clatter against fine china. The sound was deafening in the tense atmosphere, and I froze as every eye at the table turned toward me. "I apologize, sir," I whispered, mortification heating my cheeks as I scrambled to rectify my mistake. But as I reached for the fallen utensil, Romano's hand closed around my wrist, his touch surprisingly gentle despite the unmistakable strength behind it. "That girl," he said, his gaze never leaving my face as he addressed the table. "Now." The 2 simple words carried the weight of command, and the air seemed to crystallize around us as his security detail straightened, waiting for clarification of what exactly their boss wanted with an insignificant server. Romano released my wrist and gestured toward an empty chair beside him. "Join us for a moment." It wasn't a request, despite the polite phrasing, and Margot's wide-eyed stare from across the room told me compliance wasn't optional. I sat rigidly, hands folded in my lap as the men resumed their conversation in rapid Italian, occasional glances in my direction making it clear I was somehow part of whatever they were discussing. The desserts arrived, served by a visibly nervous waiter who couldn't meet my eyes. "You've worked here for 8 months, Romano said abruptly, turning his attention to me. Not a question, but a statement of fact that sent a chill down my spine. How did he know that? "My associate tells me you're studying nursing but had to take a leave of absence." He sampled the tiramisu with appreciation, before fixing those dark eyes on me again. "Family medical issues, I understand." My throat constricted, making it difficult to form words. "My mother has cancer, sir," I managed, wondering how he knew the details of my personal life. "The treatments are expensive." Romano nodded thoughtfully, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin before leaning back in his chair. "I have a proposition for you, Sophia," he said, his voice low enough that only our table could hear. "My household requires a personal assistant, someone discreet, intelligent, and unconnected to my other business interests." The other men exchanged glances. One of them, younger, with sharp features and hungry eyes, smirked in a way that made my skin crawl. "The last one didn't work out so well, Victor," he commented, earning a silencing glare from Romano. $30,000 per month, plus full medical coverage for both you and your mother at Westside Medical Center," Romano continued, as if there had been no interruption. "Dr. Ivanov there is having remarkable success with cases similar to your mother's." My mind reeled at the figure. More money in 1 month than I would make in an entire year at Bellini's. Enough to save Mom, pay off our debts, perhaps eventually return to my studies, but the implications were clear. I would be entering a world I could never leave. Why me? I whispered, unable to keep the question from escaping. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as Romano studied me with unexpected intensity, as if seeing past the uniform to something valuable beneath. Because you're invisible to most people, which means you observe without being observed, he replied with startling honesty. Because you've served this table 3 times without ever mentioning to anyone who sits here. Because loyalty to family is something we both understand. He slid a business card across the pristine tablecloth, heavy stock embossed with only a phone number. No name needed for a man everyone recognized. You have until tomorrow night to decide, he said, dismissing me with a slight nod. My driver will wait outside the restaurant after your shift ends. As I rose from the table on unsteady legs, Romano's hand briefly caught mine again. And Sophia? He added quietly, his dark eyes reflecting the candlelight. This conversation never happened. The sleek black Escalade turned through wrought iron gates that parted silently before us, revealing a winding driveway bordered by ancient oak trees. After a sleepless night and tearful goodbye to my mother at the hospital, I had made the only choice possible, the choice that might save her life. Stone walls rose imposingly against the morning sky, the Romano estate sprawling across what must have been at least 10 acres of manicured grounds. My 2 suitcases containing everything I owned looked pitifully inadequate beside the marble fountain that graced the circular drive. Miss Sophia, a woman in her 50s, greeted me at the massive oak doors, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. I am Mrs. Catalina, the housekeeper. You were expected an hour ago. The entrance hall dwarfed my entire apartment, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and artwork that looked museum quality. I clutched my purse tighter, suddenly acutely aware of my discount store clothing and scuffed shoes. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Mrs. Catalina continued, leading me through corridors that seemed designed to disorient. Staff meals are at 6, noon, and 6:30. Mr. Romano dines at 8 and expects you to join him tonight. She unlocked double doors, revealing a suite larger than my entire apartment. A bedroom with a king-sized bed, sitting area with leather furniture, marble bathroom with a shower and separate soaking tub. These were prepared specially. The usual staff accommodations are considerably more modest. My new uniform hung in the walk-in closet, tailored black slacks, crisp white blouses, and a single charcoal dress that looked eerily close to my size. How did you know my measurements? I asked, running my fingers over fabric finer than anything I'd ever owned. Mrs. Catalina's expression remained impassive. Mr. Romano is thorough in his preparations. Your schedule is on the desk. Memorize it before dinner. The security briefing is at 4. Left alone, I sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of my life. A text message chimed on my new phone, a sleek model I'd been handed upon arrival, displaying a photo of my mother smiling from a private hospital room I could never have afforded. Security Chief Marcus Blackwood was a former military man with cold eyes and a demeanor that suggested he'd seen too much to be easily surprised. The grounds are monitored 24/7, he explained, showing me camera feeds covering every angle of the estate. Never disable any security measures. Never admit anyone without clearance. There are 3 types of visitors, he continued, handing me a tablet with detailed protocols. Business associates, who remain in designated areas, social guests, permitted in common spaces, and private guests, who have unrestricted access and whose presence is never to be acknowledged to anyone. The dining room could have seated 30, but that night it was set for just 2 at one end of the polished mahogany table. I entered nervously at precisely 8 o'clock, wearing the charcoal dress that fit as if it had been made for me. Romano rose as I entered, his dark gaze sweeping over me with quiet approval. The uniform suits you, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I trust Mrs. Catalina has made you comfortable. Dinner was served by silent staff who materialized and disappeared without drawing attention to themselves. The food was exquisite. Delicate sea bass with herbs I couldn't identify, paired with wine that probably cost more than a month's rent at my old apartment. Your primary duties will begin tomorrow, Romano explained, his manner businesslike despite the intimate setting. You'll manage my personal correspondence, coordinate household matters with Mrs. Catalina, and accompany me to certain functions. I gathered my courage as dessert was served. Mr. Romano, I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I need to understand what exactly is expected of me. The question hung between us, laden with unspoken implications. His expression softened slightly. the hard lines of his face relaxing. "Contrary to what you might be thinking, Sophia, I don't make a habit of bringing young women into my household for improper reasons. Your position is professional, despite what others might assume." The relief must have shown on my face, because he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features from intimidating to almost handsome. "Your predecessor failed to understand the importance of discretion. I trust you won't make the same mistake." My days fell into a rhythm of structured tasks that gradually revealed the complexity of Romano's world. Each morning began with security briefings, followed by managing his calendar of meetings with individuals whose names I recognized from news headlines. The locked room in the East Wing became a constant source of curiosity, a heavy oak door with electronic security that required both keycard and biometric access. "Mr. Romano's private office," Mrs. Catalina explained when she caught me looking. "No one enters without explicit permission." After 2 weeks, I discovered a pattern to Romano's visitors: business associates on Mondays and Thursdays, political connections on Wednesdays, and family members who shared his olive skin and intense eyes on Sunday afternoons. Saturdays remained conspicuously empty in his calendar. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms became so common, I barely noticed them anymore. What did register was how Romano's security detail watched me, not with suspicion as they had initially, but with a cautious respect that felt unearned. One night, working late in the study adjacent to Romano's private office, I heard raised voices behind the locked door. "The situation at the docks needs to be handled permanently," a man argued, his tone aggressive. "Your father would never have hesitated." Romano's response was too low to hear clearly, but his visitor stormed out moments later, barely acknowledging my presence. When Romano emerged, his expression was controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening around his eyes. The charity gala at Westside Medical Center marked my first public appearance with Romano, in a midnight blue gown that made me almost unrecognizable to myself. "Remember," he instructed as we left the car, "you're my personal assistant, nothing more or less. Some people will assume otherwise. Let them." Photographers captured Romano's arrival, their flashes illuminating the subtle possessiveness of his hand at the small of my back. Inside, the hospital's atrium had been transformed with crystal chandeliers and arrangements of white roses, the city's elite circulating with practiced social grace. "Victor, darling," a voice like honey laced with venom interrupted our conversation with the hospital director. A stunning woman in crimson silk approached, air-kissing Romano's cheek while her eyes assessed me with naked hostility. "Alessandra," Romano acknowledged coolly. "I wasn't aware you were back in the country. Sophia, this is Alessandra Valentini, an old family friend." "Alessandra, my assistant, Sophia Bennett." The woman's perfectly manicured hand extended toward mine, her grip painfully tight as she leaned close. "So this is your latest project," she murmured, her smile never reaching her eyes. "They get younger every time, Victor." Romano's expression remained neutral, but I felt his hand tense against my back. "Sophia, would you check on the donation arrangements? I need a moment with Ms. Valentini." I retreated to a quiet corner, watching their intense conversation from a distance. Alessandra's animated gestures contrasted with Romano's controlled stillness, but the tension between them was palpable even across the crowded room. "Don't let her intimidate you," said a quiet voice beside me. I turned to find a young man in an immaculate suit, his features sharing enough resemblance to Romano to suggest family connection. "I'm Michael, Victor's cousin." Before I could respond, Alessandra's voice carried across the room as she stormed away from Romano. "Your father would be disgusted by what you're doing to his legacy." The outburst drew curious stares before she composed herself and swept toward the exit. Michael sighed beside me. "Alessandra was engaged to Victor once, before he broke it off. Her father is Sergio Valentini, our family's main rival in certain business ventures. The engagement was meant to merge interests." Romano rejoined us, his expression revealing nothing of the confrontation. "I see you've met my cousin," he said, his tone lighter than I expected. "Michael manages our legitimate business portfolio, the hotels, restaurants, and real estate developments." Later that night, as we rode home in silence, Romano finally spoke. "Alessandra's warning wasn't meant for me, but for you. Her father is a dangerous man who considers our broken engagement a personal insult." The following morning, Mrs. Catalina handed me a small velvet box with breakfast. "Security enhancement," she explained cryptically. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet with what appeared to be decorative charms. "It has GPS tracking and a panic button. Mr. Romano insists you wear it at all times now." The auction floor of Christie's hummed with anticipation. The city's elite gathered to bid on rare artifacts, with the proceeds benefiting Westside's new cancer research wing. I stood slightly behind Romano, tablet in hand, as he examined a catalog of the evening's offerings with casual interest. "There," he said quietly, indicating a glass case displaying an ornate silver dagger with a jewel-encrusted hilt. The Medici blade, 16th century, believed to have belonged to Lorenzo himself. I want it, regardless of price. Security was unusually tight, with private guards supplementing Christie's own staff. Romano had explained earlier that the auction contained several items from disputed estates, treasures claimed by multiple powerful families with complex histories. The auctioneer's gavel cracked against the podium, silencing the murmurs as bidding commenced on lesser pieces, antique jewelry, rare books, and paintings from respected artists. Romano remained silent, his attention seemingly elsewhere until the Medici blade was finally presented. The history of the Medici blade wasn't merely academic. Romano had explained earlier that in our world, certain artifacts carried symbolic weight far beyond their monetary value. Whoever possesses the dagger controls the old shipping routes, he'd whispered as we entered, a centuries-old understanding among the families. I noticed Alessandra circulating through the crowd, whispering to potential bidders who subsequently lowered their paddles when the blade came up. She was clearing the field, ensuring only her father and Romano would battle for this particular prize. The auction room's temperature seemed to drop as bidding escalated, the crowd sensing the proxy war being waged through million-dollar increments. I caught sight of Michael across the room, his expression grave as he monitored security personnel through an earpiece, his hand resting inside his jacket. "We'll start the bidding at 500,000, the auctioneer announced, his practiced eye already scanning the room for interest. Romano raised his paddle with casual indifference, as if the amount were pocket change. A flurry of competitive bids followed, the price climbing rapidly until only 2 paddles remained in play. Romano's and one held by a silver-haired man across the room whom I recognized from security briefings as Sergio Valentini, Alessandra's father and Romano's chief rival. The tension between the men was palpable, the bidding clearly about more than just the artifact. 2 million, called Valentini, his cold gaze fixed on Romano rather than the auctioneer, a challenge clearly issued. 3 million, Romano countered without hesitation, his expression betraying nothing. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The price now far exceeded the blade's estimated value. The final hammer fell at 4 million, victory secured for Romano. As we made our way toward the settlement office, Valentini intercepted us, Alessandra at his side wearing a triumphant smile despite their auction loss. "Victor," Valentini greeted with false warmth. "Such enthusiasm for Italian history. Or is it the blade's reputation for having drawn Borgia blood that appeals to you?" Romano's security tensed almost imperceptibly, as Valentini's gaze shifted to me. "Your taste in companions has certainly declined since my daughter. Does this one even know what happened to your last assistant?" I felt Romano's hand at my waist, gently guiding me past them, when Valentini deliberately stepped closer. "The authorities are still quite interested in David Miller's disappearance, you know. Perhaps your new pet should be informed of the risks of her position." The drive home passed in tense silence, Romano's expression unreadable as city lights cast shifting shadows across his features. Questions burned in my throat, about David Miller, about the risks Valentini had mentioned, about what exactly I had become entangled in. "Ask," Romano said finally, his voice cutting through the quiet. "I can see the questions in your eyes, Sophia. You deserve answers after tonight's confrontation." I chose my words carefully, aware of the driver's presence. Who was David Miller? The name felt heavy on my tongue, like speaking of the dead, though Valentini had only mentioned disappearance. The dashboard clock glowed 2:14 a.m. as we took an unexpected detour, Romano directing the driver through a series of turns until we reached an abandoned waterfront warehouse. "Wait here," he instructed, disappearing inside for 11 tense minutes, while security maintained a protective perimeter around the car. When he returned, a subtle shift had occurred, a weight lifted from his shoulders, a decision made. "Valentini was right about one thing," he said quietly, as we resumed our journey. "The stakes in our world are life and death, but not in the way he meant." The silver dagger sat between us in its custom case, removed from the auction house with proper documentation, yet somehow feeling illicit in the pre-dawn darkness. "This blade hasn't drawn blood in centuries," Romano mused, his fingers tracing the ornate hilt. "Its power comes from what it represents, not what it's done." Romano's gaze remained fixed on the passing scenery. My previous assistant, Harvard graduate, brilliant with numbers, employed for 3 years until he began selling information about my private affairs to Valentini and to the FBI. My heart stuttered in my chest. What happened to him? I asked, the question barely audible even to my own ears, uncertain if I truly wanted the answer. He's alive, if that's what you're asking, Romano replied, finally turning to meet my eyes, living under a new identity in Seattle with enough money to start over, despite his betrayal. Confusion must have shown on my face because Romano continued, his voice softer. Contrary to the stories, Sophia, I don't kill people for making mistakes. David's choice endangered my family, but his actions came from desperation. His sister needed expensive medical treatment, and Valentini exploited that vulnerability. For the first time, I saw something unexpected in Romano's expression. Not the cold calculation of a criminal, but the weariness of a man bearing burdens I couldn't fully comprehend. So I provided what he needed legitimately, in exchange for his discretion and departure. Back at the estate, I found myself unable to sleep, wandering the moonlit gardens with Romano's revelations echoing in my mind. The security cameras tracked my movement, a constant reminder that nothing here went unobserved. Mrs. Catalina found me the next morning, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath my eyes. Mr. Romano requests your presence in his private office immediately, she said, her tone carrying unusual gravity. He's never invited a personal assistant there before. The mysterious locked room opened to reveal not the crime den I'd half expected, but a sophisticated space with wall-to-wall bookshelves, fine art, and a massive desk of polished mahogany. Romano stood at the windows, morning light silhouetting his powerful frame. I'm offering you a choice, Sophia, he said without preamble. After last night, Valentini knows you're important to me. That makes you both a target and a potential asset to my enemies. He turned, holding a folder that he placed on the desk between us. Inside is everything you need to leave. New identity, enough money to finish your education anywhere in the world, and continued care for your mother. My driver will take you to the airport, and we'll never see each other again. I stared at the folder, the promise of safety and normalcy within my reach. And the alternative? I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice despite the weight of the moment. The alternative, Romano said, moving around the desk to stand before me, is that you stay, but not as my assistant. You become my partner, fully aware of every aspect of my world, both legitimate and otherwise. His dark eyes held mine, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen them. I don't make this offer lightly, Sophia. In my world, trust is more valuable than money, more rare than loyalty. You've earned both. My fingers traced the edge of the folder, the crossroads of my life contained in manila and paper. Why me? There must be women better suited to your world, connected families, shared backgrounds. Romano's laugh held no humor. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. My money, my power, my protection. You're the first person in years who looks at me and sees the man, not the position. The security monitors flickered on a nearby screen, showing Valentini's daughter being escorted through the front gates, an unexpected visitor requesting an audience. Alessandra comes seeking alliance now that her father's position has weakened, Romano explained, his expression unreadable. I'd visited my mother that morning, finding her sitting up in bed reading for the first time in months. Color returned to her cheeks. When she asked about Romano, I'd found myself defending him without hesitation, describing not the criminal empire, but the man who remembered nurses' names and funded research others dismissed as unprofitable. The Medici blade now hung in a glass case in Romano's office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of choices made. True power isn't displayed, he'd told me, watching as I studied the ancient weapon. The dagger stays visible to remind us that what we could do isn't always what we should do. Outside the windows, spring had transformed the estate gardens, blossoms replacing bare branches, a metamorphosis that mirrored my own journey from invisible server to standing at the threshold of a powerful man's inner circle. Your mother's latest test results, Romano said, producing another document from his desk drawer. Doctor, Ivanov reports the cancer is responding to treatment. She'll likely make a full recovery with continued care. Tears blurred my vision as I scanned the medical report, hope blooming after months of desperate fear. You saved her life, I whispered, the realization cementing something profound between us. Without you, she would have died. Romano shook his head, gently lifting my chin until our eyes met. I provided resources, Sophia, but you saved her through your courage. by walking into a world that terrified you because she needed you to. 3 months after that pivotal moment, I stood beside Romano at the head table of his family's annual gathering. The whispers had faded, replaced by respectful acknowledgement as I took my place as his equal, my mother now recovered and seated among honored guests. Valentini's threats had culminated in a failed attempt to infiltrate the estate, an incident that ended with Romano negotiating a tenuous peace rather than retaliating with the violence everyone expected. Strategic mercy, he had explained to me, is often more powerful than vengeance. The transformation of Romano's business interests progressed steadily under our joint direction, legitimate ventures expanding, while certain shadowy operations were gradually dismantled. The power remained, but its foundation shifted toward a legacy that could withstand scrutiny and time. As Romano rose to address the gathering, his hand found mine beneath the table, a private gesture amid the public ceremony. Today we celebrate not just family by blood, but family by choice, he began, his gaze sweeping the assembled guests before returning to me. I wore his grandmother's ring now, not as a trophy or possession, but as a symbol of partnership forged through extraordinary circumstances. The invisible girl who once collected plates had become the woman who helped reshape an empire. Romano raised his glass in a toast that silenced the room. "To Sophia," he said, pride evident in his voice, "who taught me that true power lies not in what we control, but in what we choose to build together." Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is crucial for me to continue creating content here.